Welcome to Theater Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And I'm Susan Haskins.
The Roundabout Theatre Company, one of the major nonprofit institutions in this town, is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. Todd Haimes has been the artistic director for the company, I think, going on 18 years, but he's been with the company 25 years. The Roundabout has produced some important works. It's got Pygmalion going on now. It's got Sunday in the Park with George coming up, and a play from London called 39 Steps. The key part of the cultural life in the city, but it has recently come in for some criticism on this show. Take a look at this. John, now another really, I thought, incisive piece that you wrote for The Observer. You took to task a lot of the artistic directors in this town. Todd Haimes at the Roundabout, Lynn Meadow at Manhattan Theatre Club. And I think the point you were making is, why are these nonprofit theaters, these theaters funded by taxpayer money, why are they reviving things like the Ritz? I mean, this is not cutting-edge theater. Shouldn't they be doing more adventuresome kind of things?
Yes, because that's what the non-profit theatre is about. That it's was founded originally to offer a radical alternative to Broadway and Broadway fare. But now all the big houses like Lincoln Center, like Roundabout, are on Broadway, physically there. They have these huge theatres and huge casts.
Now they want Tony Awards, they get Tony Awards.
A colossal error, in my judgment, because what it means is they become blurred into Broadway. They tend to play it safe.
Does John have a point here, Jesse, that they should be doing something with a little more zing to it?
Well, it would be nice if someone did, but I'm not sure that you can pin that on these companies who have to make money. And the Roundabout was established, as its name suggests, in part to do revivals of classic works. Whether those count as classic works, I leave to the critics. But I don't think I think it's an odd time to make that argument, given the panoply of interesting new and old plays that are coming to Broadway this season. Now, when they all fail, I think then we have to come back and see what it suggests.
But do you really leave it to the critics to invest in something like Old Acquaintance, which is just, I couldn't comprehend why this was being brought back at all, this play. A very expensive production, which Michael says is some of it taxpayer money. That shouldn't the Roundabout be censoring itself from doing that play even before the critics come in? That wasn't worthy work to put up.
Well, no one puts up a play intending it to be unworthy.
The question is whether they're there to entertain and follow the taste of their subscription lists, or whether they're there to lead. That's the fundamental question. And right now, the feeling is that the non-profit theatre isn't leading, and if it's going to substitute for Broadway, it should give up its tax-free status.
I agree completely. Absolutely. Todd, welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on to spar against John Halpern. The charge is, as John says, the nonprofit theaters aren't leading anymore. They're not on the cutting edge anymore. And if they don't lead, if they follow Broadway, they should give up their funding. Your response to that?
Well, I think there are a few responses. First of all, I think the not-for-profit theaters do lead. I look at the not-for-profit theaters, and I'm talking about the hundreds of them in New York, as part of sort of an evolutionary chain. And there are a lot of tiny ones. There are a lot of great mid-sized ones, whether it's Second Stage or New York Theatre Workshop or Vineyard. You can pick the one. There are a lot of bigger ones, and then there are three that are on Broadway, Manhattan Theatre Club, Roundabout, and Lincoln Center. And I think they all serve different roles on sort of that food chain. All of them are there to serve the artists. All of them are there to provide educational functions. All of them are there to provide discount tickets. Obviously, there's a relationship between the kind of work and the kind of risk that you can do and the size of the institution. So, you know, a theater like the New York Theatre Workshop, with a smaller theater and a smaller budget, is going to, by definition, be pushing the envelope and taking risks with plays that might have a relatively small audience appeal in a way that Manhattan Theatre Club or Roundabout or Lincoln Center can't, because financially the institution would fall apart. In the case of Roundabout, we can do productions that other theaters and commercial producers might not do because they're too big and expensive, like Pygmalion, like Les Liaisons Dangereuses, like Sunday in the Park with George. I mean, there's a reason that Sunday in the Park with George was at a not-for-profit, not at a commercial theater. All the Sondheim work we've done, like Assassins. We can do those large-scale things which appeal to a larger audience, but still not a mass audience. And even with all that, we still have to raise, all of our theaters still have to raise a lot of money in contributions. In our case, I think about $12 million a year in contributions.
What about this charge, though, that the big institutions, yours, Lincoln Center, Manhattan Theater Club, are just blurring the line between nonprofit and Broadway? I mean, you all have Broadway theaters, you compete for Tony Awards. I hear time and time again commercial producers grumbling, it's not fair that these nonprofits with this subsidy get up there and get to take these Tony Awards that are a commercial tool for us to promote our for-profit shows.
Well, I think if you look at the Tony Award as purely a commercial tool for the commercial theater, I guess I can understand their point. If you look at the Tony Awards as a reward for excellence in theater, then I would suggest that if their work were more excellent, they'd get more Tony Awards.
Well, I think the thing that you took the greatest exception to, and I understand it, was the suggestion that the Roundabout should lose its not-for-profit status, and certainly I don't agree that it should. But someone was saying to me in the funding world that the not-for-profit status was created to give money to organizations that cannot survive in the commercial world, that to do work that cannot exist, not to pay for even more lavish productions that could be possible without it, but that to do, as I believe Halpern said, challenging work. And I think that that's where people do ask about the Roundabout. Why should something where there's so much money coming in, an organization get money from the government to do productions that like Pajama Game, say, that can survive commercially without this kind of funding?
I think, first of all, not everything, some things we do are more challenging than others. Some things we do are more expensive than others, and that is largely a function of budget, frankly. Pajama Game was sort of an odd anomaly. The theater, they were going to do a commercial production of that, and couldn't find a theater. Nobody would give them a theater. Now, that sounds crazy in retrospect, but nobody would give them a theater. So the production had fallen apart. And they came to us and said, would you be interested in doing this? And I said, sure, we have the American Airlines available. Now, it makes no financial sense for us to do Pajama Game in a 700-seat theater. There's a reason why musicals are done in 1,500-seat theaters. We did it in our 700-seat theater. It did extremely well. It still did not break even because a musical can't break even in a 700-seat theater. And if we hadn't done it, it never would have happened. I think, I think theaters like ours, I look at Lincoln Center doing Cymbeline now. I mean, I think theaters like ours do work that is extremely large and extremely expensive, and we try to balance it. And frankly, I also have to tell you that for Roundabout, and this is where I speak particularly for Roundabout, we are a subscription-oriented theater. Our first mission in terms of who we're here to please is the 40,000 subscribers. And those people, I always hear you, Michael, bitching about $450. Well, you're always bitching, but this one I'd like to mention is you're bitching about the $450 seats on Broadway. Well, at Roundabout, the subscribers get the best seats in the house for $55. And we're committed to those people, and they come, whether, some good ones and some bad ones, and they're there for us.
No, and they adore you, I will say. I mean, we know some of your funders, and they do adore you.
Let me ask you, though, about the whole notion of a subscription house. There are a number of playwrights. I think Robbie Bates has talked about this, and Richard Greenberg, that working in these big institutions, you have an older subscription base. And therefore, you're kind of a prisoner to that base. You have to give them this kind of, as Halpern says, middle-brow fare. You can't challenge them because there is what driving you. Is that a fair criticism?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's a criticism if you take one theater and pick it, I suppose. I mean, I know that both Robbie and Richard love working at our theater and like our subscribers. Now, we've made an effort to get younger subscribers. We do all these outreach things now called Access Roundabout, where we have thousands and thousands and thousands of tickets available at $20 for every performance. So we have made an effort to get younger audiences in. But still in all, it's true that the average audience member is 50 or 55. But they are extremely sophisticated theater goers by definition. And they love these people's work. Now, obviously, again, let's pick on Robbie Bates. If Robbie Bates, who's a great playwright, wants to write a play that he thinks specifically is going to appeal to 25-year-olds, and that's the audience he's aiming at, he's probably not going to pick Roundabout as the place to start it. There are 50 other not-for-profit theaters who would love to do his work, who have a younger audience and a smaller audience, but a very devoted audience, and that's probably where he'd started. And to be honest with you, I think when you do the classics, there's a reason why they're called classics, which is that they transcend the time and they're great 100 years from now, 200 years from now, whatever. I feel that way about Pygmalion. I feel that way about Death of a Salesman. My objection is never to people not liking individual shows. I get it. This is a business where you have critics, and everybody always bitches about the critics, but that's the way it is. It's their right to like shows, and it's their right to not like shows. And if you can't deal with that, you shouldn't be in the business. It's just too hard. Right. But what I do object to is the critics or the theater writers, I guess, in your case, not being supportive of the institutions, because I think you don't see this in most cities in America. I think these institutions are important to the fabric of culture, and I think, quite frankly, we all have a tough time surviving. Sometimes the smaller and mid-sized ones have a tougher time than us or Manhattan Theatre Club, but even we constantly struggle. And I think we need the help, and nobody's making a fortune, certainly not the artists, certainly not the people who work there. All of the money that we make goes back to the not-for-profit theater. So when Cabaret runs for 6.5 years, every penny of that goes back to the Roundabout, not to anybody individually. We have a $1.5 million a year education program, which goes out into the school system, which nobody sees except the people who are in the education program or the students that it serves. And so my point is not to say that your job is to like everything we do, because I don't necessarily love everything we do. Sometimes it turns out better. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised, and sometimes it just doesn't work out.
But on that, and first I'll say, as the director of a not-for-profit myself, a little tiny one that does this show, you are so supportive to the community, and I've known you a long time, and appreciate your leadership in that community and the advice you've given me. But going to the individual productions, which is what I think set the critics on you. For instance, the Threepenny Opera. I sat there wondering, as I do in many of shows, why didn't someone come in before opening night and say, this is scornful and bad? That where is the producing, where is the leadership that comes in and says, this is no good, Scott Elliott. You've got to. Yeah,
close it out of town.
Right. No, not close it out of town. but you've got work to do.
The general answer is when you do a play and you start it in New York and you rehearse for 4 or 5 weeks and open, whether it's commercial or not for profit, you've sort of the die is cast when you go into rehearsal. I mean, there are just not too many cases of
Which that
plays.
Shouldn't be.
But that's the nature of theater. And specifically, I don't agree with you. So
in that one, all right.
You like Threepenny Opera?
I did. I know that the critics didn't like it. I'm willing to accept the fact that I'm wrong, but I can't tell you that I hated it. I liked it.
Let me ask you though, when you have a show like Threepenny Opera, which you could actually argue was a kind of cutting-edge show. You've been criticized for being middlebrow. I didn't think it was successful, but it certainly wasn't middlebrow, the Threepenny Opera.
Nah, it wasn't cutting.
But do you ever find, though, that your subscribers actually object to a production like that? And do you hear from them? And how do you kind of, calm the subscribers down if they don't like something vociferously?
I actually, believe it or not, I have an email address that we send out before every show. It's the same address, but we send out a letter before every production to our subscribers inviting comment. And they do, and I answer each one personally, which is actually rather time-consuming.
Well, you said that a quarter of your time has to be spent on fundraising.
Yeah,
and that's
it's busy.
Being
smart. I spend a lot of time answering email, but it's good because not only is it good for consumer relations, but it's good for me because I actually do hear the feedback that you're talking about. And sometimes, and of course, the people who don't like it tend to respond more than the people who do. So sometimes I do hear, and I respond sort of honestly, and usually they appreciate the response and they look at it as part of a whole. So they're not, their attitude. Frankly, the subscribers are much more supportive than the critics because they look at it as, look, I saw 7 plays and some of them I loved and some I didn't love and some of them probably weren't good and some of them probably were just not my taste. But I'm happy this institution is here. And what makes me sad is exactly what you're talking about. This sort of roller coaster ride of if we do Assassins, we're a great institution. Then if we do whatever, show three-penny opera, then we're a bad institution. We're not cutting edge, but if we take a risk and do three-penny opera, then, but it's not good, so we are cutting edge, but we're bad. So, and I, you know, I just wish people would take a slightly longer view and be a little bit more supportive of the institution, not of the individual production.
Let me ask you, Todd, how many theaters do you have now?
We have 4, including the Black Box.
All right, 4 theaters. That is a big infrastructure to support. But why, though, the drive for a nonprofit theater to become a kind of mini Schubert empire? You know, if you had one theater, you wouldn't have to raise all this money to keep all these theaters going, and you could concentrate on a variety of, you know, more or less middle-brow productions, more cutting-edge productions than one theater. Why do you all feel the need, you nonprofit theater leaders, to have so many theaters?
I think fundamentally because there are so many artists that we want to work with that want to work with us. I mean, I know that's sort of a simple answer, but I think it's the truth. I mean, I really think our goal is to do as much work as possible. There's so much talent out there. I mean, we could debate for eternity about, you know, the individual quality of the work and whether we should make that choice or MTC should make that choice or whoever should make that choice. But the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of really talented people, actors, directors, writers, designers, that want to work in our theater. So one of the things I look at is trying to do as much work as possible and have it be the highest quality as possible. So, I mean, to me, it's not building an empire. In an odd way, to be completely personal about it, you know, the bigger we get, the harder it gets. I spend more time fundraising and more time doing other things that are not necessarily so much fun for me. And I certainly don't get paid, you know, by the number of theaters we have.
By the house.
Or anything like that.
Right. No royalties for you from each theater.
You know, I do sort of feel it's my obligation or my legacy, or however you want to look at it, you know, to try to do as much work as possible. And, you know, there's this famous Jerry Schoenfeld quote. I don't know when he originally said it. If I hear it one more time, I think I'm going to take a gun and blow somebody's brains. I'm not sure if it's his brains out or my brains out, about there's no profit like not-for-profit.
Yes.
I honestly don't know what he's talking about. I mean, the commercial theater makes millions of dollars, and all of it goes to them, to individuals, and he drives around in limousines, and you know, the not-for-profit theater, all of us work extremely hard, and any money that we make goes back to the institution. And I don't even understand where that comment comes from.
So no limo for Todd Haimes?
No limo.
Well, I guess, though, you got to look at it this way. You're talking about bringing Cabaret back, right? Are you going to do that? Is that definite? No. You're not going to do it?
No, but we were talking about it.
All right. And I criticized it in the paper. I love the production. I mean, it was one of the best things I've ever seen in the theater. And it was thrilling for the Roundabout to do it in that small space at the time. But then the idea of bringing back what is now a financial juggernaut in a way to just sort of, I don't know, shore up the finances. It would be as if, you know, the Public Theater were going to revive a chorus line just as a cash cow. Why would you want to return to a cash cow? Why wouldn't you want to find the new Cabaret and the new Sam Mendes? Well,
the answer, I remember that column you wrote, and again, I thought we had this discussion. I thought what you said made absolutely no sense. Why on earth would, if we created the production, and it was our vision to begin with, really Sam Mendes' vision that we took on, and then Rob Marshall, and there was interest in reviving it from Sam and Rob, which there was at the time. Why on earth should we turn it over to a commercial producer to do when it was our production? We can do it. We can make the money if it makes money, and have it go back to Roundabout as opposed to go into the pocket of the Schubert organization or whoever else it might be that's the commercial producer of that entity. I mean, that literally makes no sense to me. It has nothing to do with not wanting to do other works, but frankly, as I said, you know, talking about Cabaret, we don't produce works with the intention of them being huge commercial successes. That's sort of the opposite of what we do.
But with something like a Cabaret, bringing it back, if you were to bring it back, that would be producing with the idea that it was a financial hit first time, and it will be a financial hit again.
It was our production. For us not to be the person reviving it, just hand it over to a commercial producer so that the money can go into a country home in Connecticut rather than back into Roundabout.
Yeah.
Frankly, I find offensive.
Where Jerry Schoenfeld lives, I believe.
Wasn't specifically talking about him, but okay.
No country home for you, Todd.
No, actually not.
You are doing Sunday in the Park with George from the Chocolate Factory, 39 Steps, which is coming from somewhere else in London. Again, another criticism is you go shopping to London and you just see these things in London, you buy them there, and you bring them along. Why not develop your own production of A Sunday with the Park with George here, or 39 Steps here? Do you go to London on a shopping tour?
Yes, I go with a big basket, and I put in whatever I want. Well, in the case of Sunday in the Park with George, I mean, it's pretty simple. It was a brilliant production. Steve Sondheim and James Lapine wanted that production seen here. I think they prefer to have that production on Broadway. We have a long association obviously with Steve and his work. Bob Boyette was the commercial producer involved with the West End production.
Right.
Bob came to us. If Bob wanted to do it commercially on Broadway, Bob would have done it commercially on Broadway.
He's a very, very rich man.
I can't really honestly speak for him, but
right.
For whatever reason, he thought it would be better at Roundabout in a more protected environment. And Steve obviously agreed, because Steve does what Steve wants to do with his work. And so that, for us, was kind of a no-brainer. And we're casting the rest of the cast with a new American cast, and we're bringing over the 2 leads from London. It's most of what we do is a melange of things. We have Les on Dangereuse coming up, which is a first revival of that play in 21 years. Mm-hmm. It's a huge production. And then now in our little theater, which has turned out to be a huge hit, we have a play by a 27-year-old playwright called Speech and Debate, which is selling out.
Extended.
It's extended through February in our little 60-seat theater, and which cost us about $200,000 to produce, even at 100% capacity.
And it's gotten you the best reviews.
It's gotten great reviews, but I mean,
see, that tells you that small, cutting-edge thing is the way to go if you want to please the critics.
Maybe, I think there's both. But it's look, it's exciting to work on a small, cutting-edge production. It's exciting to work on Sunday in the Park with George.
Is there a danger? You and I know that this industry is now dominated by extremely rich people who. They've blurred the line between profit and non-profit themselves by putting something like Coram Boy on Broadway in a commercial production and losing $6 million. Is there a danger, though, that if someone like a Bob Boyette, who has the rights to A Sunday in the Park with George or 39 Steps, decides, I don't want to keep losing all that money on Broadway, so I can go to Todd and I can get Todd to do it for me? Do you then become beholden to some of these rich people who, for whatever whim they have, want to put this show here, but they just don't want to lose that much more money anymore?
I think I don't. The answer is I don't feel beholden, because I only do the work that I want to do. So to me, Sunday in the Park with George, I don't feel beholden to Bob. I feel grateful to Bob, I guess, that he actually brought it to us and that we're doing it. I suppose you could make the argument that if he was giving not-for-profits, millions of dollars to do work that was not so good, so maybe there'd be something bizarre about that. But he actually does have a good taste, and so I'm happy to be doing those plays. And the other thing I keep on forgetting to mention, because John Halpern was sort of insinuating it on that television show that.
Our television show,
yeah, your television show, which I always hear mumbled about, and I find it so humorous. There's always this talk about public dollars, and there's this insinuation that somehow, taxpayer dollars are going to fund whatever it is that he's upset about that particular day. And, it should be noted that while obviously not-for-profit theaters, like any not-for-profit institution, don't have to pay taxes, less than 1% of our budget, considerably less than 1% of our budget, comes from government funding. In this country, government funding from the arts, sadly, is almost completely gone.
Speech and Debate, a really interesting play by a young writer. Are you telling us, by doing this in this new space, this black box space, that we can expect more of this kind of fare from the Roundabout in the future?
In the black box space, yeah.
All right. And if it's a hit there, you wouldn't move it to the American Airlines?
Well, actually, no, I don't think we'd move it to American Airlines. I suppose if the Pels had been free, maybe we would have moved it to the Pels. I mean, it's very cool. Look, the thing that you have to understand from my perspective, speaking very personally, but I'm sure it's true of the other people who run theaters, is that when you encounter talent, what you think is talent, it's very, very exciting, and you want to make it happen for them, and you get excited about it. So when Stephen Karam gave us this play, just as human beings, I thought it was really exciting. I really wanted to make that play happen. I didn't think it would work well in a huge setting to begin with, and that was the genesis of Roundabout Underground. It's nothing really more simple or more complicated than that, to encourage this guy and his work. And a lot of other theaters do that, and that's why we're all here. That's what still turns us on. That's what, even after all these years of Roundabout, and even after all the bad reviews as well as some of the good reviews and all the problems, what really turns me on is talent and doing something good. And sometimes it works out perfectly and it's heaven, and sometimes it doesn't work out perfectly and it's not heaven.
And you get grilled by Susan Haskins.
And you get beaten up by Susan Haskins, but you just keep going. Right.
Well, listen, Todd, we appreciate your taking the time to come on. You're a great sport about our controversial show about the Roundabout, and we are delighted to have you here.
And I'd like to quickly say that, like Todd Haimes, we welcome your email on this topic. Thank you, Todd.
Thanks.
Thanks.